So good morning and welcome to today's webinar. It has quite a long and wordy title, Essential Planning and Evaluation in Preparation for Inspection in Scotland. So what are we really looking at? Well, we're looking at self-evaluation and improvement planning, and we're looking at doing it using the How Good Is Our School, or the HGIOS framework. I'm Daniel O'Brien. I'm actually the founder of ABACUS, the company behind the service and the software that we're talking about today. I've actually been working with schools for about 25 years actually, and my focus in the last 10 or 15 years has been self-evaluation and improvement planning. And this quality assurance process that I support schools with, and my company, our organisation, works closely with schools on, this quality assurance process is really the foundation of preparation for inspection, knowing where you are, knowing why you're at that point, and what you're going to do to improve. So in today's webinar, what we're going to look at is the ABACUS model, this fantastic, simple yet powerful model or approach that people take when they want to evaluate and diagnose and improve. So we're going to look at this ABACUS model that's been around for probably about 40 years now in education. Then we're going to look at how that model is actually used in iAbacus. This really simple, straightforward tool uses the model, but also uses the How Good Is Our School framework, and how that can actually empower you to prepare for inspection, to prepare for those challenging conversations. And then we're going to look at what you can take away after this webinar. Hopefully you'll be encouraged by what you see. You'll want to take away what you've learned and use it within your school, and you can do that for 3 months following this session. So let's talk about the ABACUS model to start with. So as I mentioned, it's been around for about 40 years. It was actually developed by a really good friend of mine. He was a school head teacher, he was a principal, he was also an inspector for a short time, but he spent a lot of time working with schools, helping them to improve. And he came up with a really simple, straightforward model. Let me just take you through it. Okay, so here we have an abacus. Okay, now this abacus is the kind of the visual tool that we use when we're talking about the ABACUS model. And you have a bead essentially for all the different areas that you want to evaluate. So when we're talking about the HGIOS framework, we're actually talking about quality indicators. But let's just talk in general terms. You might have a bead for leadership, you might have a bead for quality of teaching, behaviour management, attendance, whatever it is that you want to evaluate in the school. Now over here on an abacus represents excellent, outstanding, good, kind of the top level. Down here, this might suggest actually if you put a bead over here that you've got a lot of work to do in that area. But what the model does, it asks you to make a judgment to start with, to slide a bead to where you feel things are at. So you might say, actually, this bead for leadership, where would you put it in your school? Would you confidently slide it right over here into good or excellent or outstanding? If you do slide that bead over there, what you're actually saying is, I believe that at the moment leadership is at this excellent, this good level, and the model that we use would challenge you on that basis. It would say, okay, if you put the bead over here for good leadership or excellent leadership in your school, what criteria are you basing that judgment on? What challenge questions, what quality indicators, what features of highly effective practice? And then if you can confidently put the bead there, what evidence do you have to support that judgment? And then my favourite part of this model, this process, is where we actually challenge people to say, okay, what are the things that helped push that bead to this level? If over here is good and down here needs support, or it's poor or low level, what helped you get to this point? What are the helping factors? But also, what are the hindering factors, the barriers to improvement, to development, to that higher level of quality? Because if you can identify what has helped, what has hindered, then you can put things in place to strengthen those helping factors, keep that bead where it is, push maybe other beads in the right direction. If you can identify the hindering factors, the barriers to performance, to higher levels of performance, then you can do something about them. So that's what this model kind of guides you through. It ends with action planning, because if you know how to tackle those helps and those hinders, then that's going to obviously lead to action planning. So this model was used effectively in schools. It was actually used on huge kind of flip charts with good old-fashioned marker pens. When I discovered this model and really began to understand it, my role was to turn that into an online tool, and that's what we've done with this ABACUS model. We've made it available to school leaders, to middle leaders, to principal teachers, to help them evaluate, diagnose and improve, but basically using this model. And of course, in Scotland, we embed the HGIOS framework or criteria sets from Education Scotland, so that it's ultra applicable and that it's relevant and it's current and it fits your setting. So what I'll do is, in the next two sessions, the next two sections of this session, we're going to look at the ABACUS tool and see how it works. We're then going to discuss what you can take away after this session, and that's use of this tool for 3 months in your school to help you evaluate, diagnose and plan. And then we'll of course have a question and answer session. Hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions that you have. So let's dive into the tool. Now if you just bear with me, I'm going to open up my web browser. I'm going to log into it and I'm going to share my screen. So I'll just get my screen ready. Okay, and then I'm going to share it. So if you just bear with me. Almost there. Okay, so I've logged into the tool. When you log in, you probably won't see as many abacuses as I've got here, but you will be able to start a new abacus. And what you will essentially do is click on New Abacus and then choose a relevant template. So we've loaded this system with a huge amount of ABACUS templates to help you evaluate, to plan and to improve. And of course, the one that would make sense to look at to start with is the HGIOS framework. So let's open up the HGIOS framework, version 4, which is the most current version of this framework, and let's start the ABACUS. Now you'll see it loads in. Okay, let's just have a look at what we've got here. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we can see it more in context. Now, interestingly, the framework for your schools in Scotland has 6 levels. Okay, I wish it had 4. I wish it was more condensed, but it isn't. So we've accommodated that, and we have an abacus here. So you'll see the levels across the top. Okay, these are where we can start to make judgments against. Okay, these kind of continuum of higher quality right through to excellent. Okay, down the left hand side, this is where we've got your quality indicators, and you'll recognize these from the framework. They're split into the 3 different sections. Okay, and what this enables us to do is to make judgments by picking up the bead and sliding it to where we feel we are currently. Okay, so this is that first step, actually mimics the old-fashioned wooden abacus that we started to use earlier when I was explaining the model. So you pick up the bead, you make a judgment and you say, okay, at the moment, self-evaluation for self-improvement in our school, and I see a lot of beads just get dropped here, just into good. Okay, and it starts to guide us through this improvement journey, this process of preparing our evidence, analysing what's helping and hindering, and then planning actions to improve. So the bead is here, we've dropped it in good. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I like to see people just sliding a few of the other beads just to make other judgments, just based on your professional knowledge about your school. Because sometimes it might show you that actually you're less confident about an area of provision or an area of effectiveness than other kind of relative areas. So let's just put a few beads on here. I might be quite confident about that one. Leadership and management of staff, I might be even more confident. And then eventually we'll see our bead positions, and it will probably lead us maybe to actually work on one of them, to focus down on one of them. So let's do that. Let's pick up this bead for leadership of learning. Okay, and let's work through the process. So if you remember the model, we always challenge people when they make a judgment, what criteria have you based that judgment on? So let's have a look at the criteria. We open it up. Of course, we're going to pull in the relevant documentation, but actually what we're interested in are these challenge questions. Okay, if we've put the bead here, we might have been a little bit more optimistic and put it up here. What we're able to do now is to look at these challenge questions, the features of highly effective practice, and perhaps moderate that judgment. We might bring this up on an interactive whiteboard or discuss it with colleagues, our fellow senior leaders, when we might say, okay, do you think we meet this criteria? Is this judgment we've made accurate based on our school performance at the moment? And we might say, actually, we're doing a lot of these things, but not all of them consistently, so maybe actually it's more like our bead needs to be here. Okay, that's helping you validate that judgment, it's helping you make a more accurate judgment. Let's move on to the next stage. Okay, once we're happy with our judgment, we now need to signpost the evidence that supports that judgment. It's a logical next step, isn't it? If we say that we're good at something or we're excellent, what evidence can we signpost to justify that judgment? So, in the tool, you've got the option of writing some text, linking to something in SharePoint or Google Drive or Dropbox, wherever you might have it, or even uploading those files. So what I'll do here is I'll just write a fairly generic evidence statement. Okay. Basically, our evidence says, this is what I'm pointing to. I'm including it because it shows this. Okay, and it might be a survey, it might be a report. We might want to actually use some bullet points, but we're free to type into here, this is the evidence and what it shows. Okay, now I'm not going to spend too long on the evidence section because it's fairly straightforward, isn't it? It's kind of signposting what supports the judgment. There is a level 5 illustration in here, and what this does, it just maybe gives us some pointers to what kind of evidence we need to be thinking of. Okay, and that's great because actually we want to be able to give qualitative and quantitative evidence to support the judgment. But actually, when we're happy we've supported that, we're going to move on to the analysis. Okay, remember the original ABACUS model? We've got that bead, we put it on a position, there are things that are helping, things that are hindering, and this is now where we diagnose what they are. Excuse me. So all we do on the left hand side, we bullet point or we put into the system anything that's helping, and we just use really positive language. We might use something that actually is in the evidence because it is helping, so let's put that in there. If there's something that was actually a really kind of big factor that's pushing us in the right direction, we might even push that to the top of the list on here. Okay. Now, there will be members in your team that you work with that are excellent at identifying problems. Okay, and this is for them now. This is where they can put their hindering factors. What is it that's holding us back in this area? Okay, and you might already have a feel for what some of these things are in your school. So this is where you put them, and we have to be honest. We have to use probably negative language and say that there's a lack of something, or this is ineffective, or this is costing too much in time. Let's put those hindering factors in now, just a few examples. Okay, so there were different hindering factors for whatever you're evaluating, and that makes sense, doesn't it? But we list them. Again, if we need to put more in here, we can do, and we can say actually this factor kind of was the biggest impact at the moment. Maybe just put that wording in. And what we might do is we might prioritize that to the top and say actually that's an issue as well as that being an issue. Okay, so our diagnostic really kind of brings to the fore why are we at this point? Why have we been able to say leadership is good? What's helping? What's hindering? It beautifully sets up the action planning. If you look at the actions here, if you look at the factors, these are actually the things that we need to strengthen, make sure they happen again. We don't want to take our eye off these things because they're helping. But on the other side, we've got our hindering factors. We know that these are the barriers. If we don't do anything about these things, if we log back into the ABACUS in 6 months' time, the bead will be where it is and we won't be able to move it. Okay, so in the action planning, all we do is we start with our list of helping and hindering factors. We're busy, school leaders and our colleagues are also busy, so we can't work on everything. So what we do here is we just say, okay, so these things, we're aware of them, they do help, but we're not going to do anything about them at the moment. And likewise with some of these issues, they're not things that are in our kind of power to change at the moment, but this thing here is actually an issue. So let's expand it and let's think about what we're going to do about it. who's going to lead on that action, whatever it is we decide to do, and what our success criteria will look like and when we need to do it by. So we've got a planning strip, and we can plan now our action, our improvement strategy to overcome this hindering factor. So here we are, what we're going to do, what our success criteria will look like. Perhaps we need to give ourselves a deadline. Sometimes in schools it is about saying actually we need to do this once a term or at the end of a quarter. We might have already started it. That would be great if we had. So what we can do here is we can kind of say that we've started this. 21% is a bit specific. Let's maybe try and leave that at 20%. All right, 19%, that'll do. We might even put a bit of a progress statement in here, kind of saying how we're kind of getting on with that action. Let's just recap at this point what we've done. Okay, we made a judgment about something by sliding a bead to a particular point in time. Okay, so I think we were looking at leadership of learning. So this is where we are currently. We then checked that judgment against the criteria, and of course we brought in the HGIOS framework with the quality indicators and the challenge questions. We signposted our evidence. We didn't have to go to town on this, by the way. Sometimes we can overdo evidence. Just short, snappy statements, golden paragraphs even, that point to the right evidence. We analysed the current situation because we know why we're at this point, and then we put actions in place to do something about that. Now, if you think about that process, that's a very robust, rigorous process that we've been through. We can do it for some of the beads or all of the beads. If we do that, what we end up with is a self-evaluation and an improvement plan. And what we probably want to do is share that with others. Okay, so we're up here, we can export this document as a PDF document. If I download it, you'll see that it's got the bead positions on. Okay, so it's a nice visual document. It's really clear, really concise. It's not just a pretty kind of abacus. We know that behind each bead, if I click on this bead here, I should be able to go down to it. Let's have a look. Leadership of learning. There we go. I've got the evidence statement we put in, the analysis, okay, why we're at this point with our helping and hindering, and of course our detailed action planning with our progress updates. So this document forms a really robust self-evaluation and improvement plan. We can share it with others, we can provide it to inspectors. It shows people we know where we're at, why we're at that point, and what we're going to do to improve, or what we're going to do to sustain that effectiveness that we already have in place. So this is the tool that we'd like to give you. You can have it for 3 months, you can use it in your school. It's going to jumpstart or really kind of push on your kind of strategic thinking and your planning. If we just take another look at the abacus, okay, because it's online and because it's in this digital format, we have a few extra benefits that we can use this tool to kind of apply. The first is demonstrating our improvement and our progress. Sometimes that's really hard to do when you've got a Word document or a PDF document, but with an abacus, essentially what you do is you pick up another bead and you say, actually, things have improved. They were there, but I reckon now we're like pushing on very good. And you drop that bead, it knows you've made a new judgment. Okay, it actually allows you to carry across all of your evidence and your analysis onto this new bead, so you don't have to kind of re-enter things. And actually, if you notice on the abacus here, if I just zoom in a little bit, what have we got? Our old bead here, where we were, and our new bead here, where we are now, and it's demonstrating that improvement, that progress. And all I'd do is I'd pick up this bead, I might go into the evidence, and when I'm in the evidence section now, I might say, actually, we've got new data, kind of new statistics, new achievement results. So this new data, what does it show? It shows progress and it shows improvement. And in the analysis, I'd be looking at maybe taking out some of these hindering factors. They're no longer the barriers that we face, but we might have new challenges within the school. Things might have changed, we might have lost some key members of staff, we might have had changes to the building, whatever it may be, they may be the new hindering factors, and we might prioritise those and then move on to our action planning, and then we obviously want to work on those things and do the similar kind of planning process that we've been through. So this is what the tool's about. It's about doing an initial self-evaluation and improvement plan, but then just topping that up with new thinking, new analysis, and hopefully kind of new planning. So it's brilliant at using in an ongoing basis. Finally, all abacuses are collaborative. Okay, so what you can do is you can invite someone to your abacus. You could say to your senior colleagues, you slide the bead, where do you think we are? Put your evidence in, what you think kind of supports the judgment, and what do you think is helping and hindering? And in that way, we get a fantastic kind of 360-degree approach. It could be that you give abacuses to colleagues, and actually what you say is, have an abacus for your curriculum area, your subject, follow the steps, follow the processes, and then share that with us as a central team, as a school leadership team, and we'll kind of have a look at how things are going. Now, what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to exit this account, and if you forgive me for logging into another account, what I'll do is I'll just show you what that looks like, okay? Because this is something that you might look at in the long term. You might use iAbacus to start with, just kind of centrally within the school with the school leadership team, but later you might want to expand it. Okay, and you might want to say, yes, let's give this to our principal teachers, let's give this to our kind of central leadership team, our middle leaders. What we'll do is we'll let them have an abacus, and then what we'll do is we'll overlay them, okay, and we will look at where they are, their subject areas. And it's this central kind of dashboard that gives you access to incredible insights, because behind each bead we know that there's evidence. I can look at these beads here and I can say, well, what was the evidence for that judgment? What was their analysis? Why have they put the bead there? What's hindering them to that point? What do they do? What are they planning to do to improve? So Ross in the music department has made quite a severe judgment about where teaching and learning is at the moment, but we want to be able to support them and guide them through kind of navigating what those helps and hinders are and what they need to do about them. There will obviously be some good practice that you want to replicate. So you might see 3 beads up here. Who are they? You've got a fantastic art department. What was their evidence? What have they done that's helped them get to that point? What are they going to do to sustain that performance? So when we're looking at these overlays, or these what we call stacks, this is where you get access to school-wide insight. But think about the process that you've guided people through. Slide a bead to make the judgment, and then pick that bead up and check your evidence, your criteria, check your evidence, look at your analysis, put together your action planning. It's a really straightforward process. So hopefully you can see there that what you're going to get access to is something that's visual, it's interactive, it's actually quite enjoyable to use, dare I say enjoyable, for self-evaluation and improvement planning. But it really is. So hopefully you've kind of been encouraged to see that this is not a really overly technical tool. It's based on a model. We'd like you to go away, get familiar with it, use it in your school. You've got completely free access as part of this webinar for 3 months. After that, you can either take out a support package with us that includes training and inset sessions and customization. But it is something that we find school leaders really appreciate, supports their thinking, helps them look at what they're doing with a view to doing it better. So what I'll do now is I'll just open up for any questions on a question and answer session. Please feel free to type into the chat box. Let's have a look, let's make sure I can see that. I've got the chat box open, I've got the Q&A section. If anything does come in, I shall answer that. So thank you very much, Mr. Fraser. I shall get to your question now. So what I'm going to do is just reshare my screen, because one of our colleagues has asked about pricing after the trial, which is a sensible question, and one that we don't hide the answer to, not like a lot of companies. So let me just bring up the costs. Okay, I'm going to open a tab and just go to iAbacus.com. So iAbacus.com. I know the prices, I just want you to see where they are. iAbacus.com, in the education section, okay, and then if I look at the pricing here, okay. So we've got a flexible pricing policy, okay, 2 ways that you can buy it, okay. This is after your 3-month trial if you want to. Let's say that you have it and you just want it, one user. You'd pay a base cost of £250, and then just £25 per user. So for £275 per year, that would empower one head teacher, school principal, leader to use the tool. But you may want to add in colleagues, okay? So you might add in your middle leaders, heads of departments, principal teachers. So you might buy 10 licenses. And on here, you can just go into the calculator and you can work out how much that would cost, okay? Hopefully you're looking at these prices and you're thinking it's not prohibitive. Let's have a look at 10 users. 10 users in your school would be £500 a year, okay? But I'm going to give you something else to consider here. What about maybe considering an unlimited license? Okay, this would empower everyone in your school to use the tool. Middle leaders, teachers for reflection, self-reflection and growth planning. And that is £995 or £1995 depending on the size of your school. If I just scroll down, you'll see that that includes everything. And the very bottom option here just shows that if you take the unlimited option, we will work with you on any template design and any staff training inset sessions. So just to give you a bit of a view on the flexibility of the tool, I mentioned there that you can use it for teacher development and teacher growth planning. And that's because the same model, the model that we've just used to evaluate school effectiveness, we can use at departmental level, at subject level, or even at personal professional level. So let's have a look here. We've got a teacher review and growth plan. Okay, so it's a visual abacus. We don't necessarily have inspectorate language on here, so we're not looking at kind of inadequate through to outstanding or poor through to good and excellent. What we've got are levels, areas that we might evaluate. We can move these beads in exactly the same way, but look at the model that we follow. Checking the criteria, so there might be some teacher standards in here, there might be the GTC standards. Evidence to support my judgment. Why do I think my teaching is at this level? What's helping and hindering me in my performance at the moment as a teacher? And if I put something in here as a hindering factor, of course, what am I going to do about it? And who's going to help me on that? And what will my success look like? So you can see this model is completely flexible. And that's why it works as a tool, because once you adopt it and you adopt this model, you can then use it for anything. So we've got STEM self-evaluation in here, where you're looking at your science and your technology. Similar process, well, same process, similar structure. Okay, so that's the flexibility of the tool, should you want to expand it and use it with colleagues later down the line. Let's have a look. Any more questions? Just bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing again. Got the chat option. Let's have a look. Well, that's very, very positive feedback there. One of our colleagues has said that they've used this as a faculty head and it was good. Brilliant, that's excellent. Excellent for self-evaluation. So it is one of those models that sometimes you deploy it in school at your moment in time for your needs. So it might be as head of a subject, it might be as a faculty leader, and as you progress through your career, you look at it then as a school self-evaluation and improvement tool. We've actually in England got multi-academy trusts using it. So they will look at trust quality assurance and they'll do risk registers and risk assessment. It's always exactly the same process, exactly the same model. The customization, I've got a question here on customization. Okay, let me just very briefly show you how it can be customized. Any abacus can be customized. Okay, so let's say you even wanted to start with the HGIOS framework. You've got kind of all the key questions here and quality indicators rather. But actually what you can do, you can click on customize. Okay, you can take out, change any of the levels. So it might be that actually you're quite confident in your school that you don't need to kind of work at these lower levels. That might be great, so let's take those out. It might be actually that you're not going to focus on all of these quality indicators to start with. There are only key ones that you want to work on, and therefore that's important sometimes to manage workload. So let's take out the whole of that section. Okay. And all I've done here is start to tailor what it is I'm going to evaluate, what it is we're going to improve in the school. Where I think this sometimes comes into really good effect is if you're working with middle leaders and principal teachers who are subject leaders and you want them to self-evaluate, but you don't need to give them all of the HGIOS framework, then customize the template, take out the quality indicators you're not going to use, and then share this with them. So now you've got a really focused, work balanced self-evaluation that somebody could work through, and they will just work through in the same way. If you wanted to, you can even start with a blank abacus. You can say, let's make our own levels up. Okay, let's make our own language. Let's use our own language. In our school, in our federation of schools or groups of schools, we use this terminology. So let's customize this. And actually at this lower level, let's call this developing. Okay, and let's not make it red. Let's keep it in this kind of blue theme. So developing, we might say this is establishing, there we go. And then we might even say, actually, at this top level, we want to call this enhancing. Okay, now, what is it we want to evaluate? Okay, well, let's just evaluate one thing. Let's have a look at behaviour management in our school. Okay, and let's work on this abacus. And you can see we've just tailored a structure, picked off a key priority in our school, but we can use the same model. We can pick up that bead, slide it on this continuum and say, right, okay, behaviour management. Let's have a look at the criteria. And we might have used a national framework, some advice from a group of experts on what good behaviour management looks like. But we just follow this model. So there we go, that's iAbacus. You now have it for 3 months to use in your school or whatever level you like. Please feel free to request a one-to-one if you want a session with me where I can talk to your school leaders, even talk to you for a bit longer time and personalise it to you. All you need to do is go to my personal kind of booking page, which is opius.com/Daniel. opius.com/Daniel. You can see that web address up here if you want to pause the video. Pause the webinar after it's been recorded, and that will just allow you to book a one-to-one with me. It's probably the best way to see how that tool can be applied in your school and what some of the advantages are of the support packages that we offer. So thank you very much for your time today. Have a lovely day, and hopefully I'll see you on Teams or Google Meet or Zoom at a later point. Thank you very much.